right, 5 minutes after 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in to The Source, WOCA. Beautiful Wednesday morning. I hope you're doing well. There's a commercial I see on the internet, I guess, is where I see this, usually before a YouTube video starts. And it'll be promoting some kind of a website where you can go and play these mental games. Have you ever seen this? And the whole gist of it, Dan, is to exercise your brain.
Oh, yeah, I like using those.
Right?
Yeah.
I have an experience I want to tell you about. When I worked at an assisted living facility, in the facility there was a memory support unit. This is a locked up area where the people who were suffering from one form of dementia or another, Alzheimer's being the name everybody recognizes, would live. These people would live there. And I went back there one time and was just kind of messing around with some flashcards that were, I guess, purchased and nobody was using them. And I really didn't know they. Now, when I say flashcards, these were the size of 8.5 by 11-inch sheets of paper.
Oh, that's a big flash.
Yeah, well, big pieces. Okay, and so the folks were sitting around and in different levels of this weird state that people become in when they get these diseases, these dementia diseases. Some of them more distant than others, I guess is the best way to say this. And I can remember pulling out these flashcards, and each one was, instead of words, it was pictures. And one was a picture of the Empire State Building. And a guy was walking past, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, I know where that is. That's in New York City." Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Wow, you talk?" I mean, it sounds silly, right? But I really had never heard this guy speak before. So the folks who were sitting there just kind of in a circle, they were kind of half paying attention to the TV that was on, and maybe even not. But then I turned the card around, whatever, and I said, "Anybody know where this is?" "Oh, yeah, it's New York City." Right?
Association by pictures.
It was an amazing thing to see that our brains really are more amazing than we realize. And the next interview we have is such a fascinating look. And we refer to our mind and our brain often as if it's the one and the same. And of course, we kind of realize that it's not. How many people have had a circumstance, for example, where you've I don't know, you got through an operation or something and you're not quite out of the anesthesia yet, right? And next thing you know, you're thinking fine, but you can't express yourself at all. So your mind is working, but your brain and body aren't necessarily working. Stephen J. Fogel has explored this topic and then some. He is a longtime student of human behavior and development. He's an active participant in the human movement, which I am too. He's a mentor, an inspirational speaker, past chairman of the California Arts Council, and the founder of Westwood Financial. So with all of that under his belt, he's written this book. It's called Your Mind is What Your Brain Does for a Living. Learn how to make it work for you. Stephen J. Fogel, an honor to be able to speak to you. What a fascinating book you've written. Good morning, Stephen.
Well, thank you, and so much thank you for inviting me here.
Where are you right now? Are you in California?
Los Angeles, yes, Los Angeles.
Oh.
And it's early, but it's a beautiful morning.
Then thank you for getting up early to be with us today. We just had a guest up in San Francisco on the phone with us.
I know, right?
So a little farther south, and we'll have smoke, right, with the San Diego fires.
I'm not even aware there were the fires this morning, but sorry to hear that.
Oh, yeah, down in San Diego, you've got some things going on down there. So your mind is what your brain does for a living. I like the title, first of all. And the separation of mind and brain, it's almost like the separation of soul and body. It's almost like a religious thing, isn't it?
Well, it depends how you look at it. The way I try and look at it, and by the way, the language, recently I read something that I thought was fascinating that explained that the way we explain things is always due to the technology of our day. So today, the technology of our day is in this tremendous digital revolution. And our digital revolution, we associate so much with computers. So the difference between the mind and the brain, the metaphor I like to use for it is that the brain would be the central nervous system, which has many components, and that would be similar to the hardware, our computer, our cell phone, as they come from the factory without any programming whatsoever. And then we program ourselves, and the programming we do would be the software, and that would be the mind. So an example of that would be we're all born into this world with some pre-bundled information, but most of it is a blank chalkboard, and we fill in the information. And so one of us may feel that asparagus is delicious, and the next one may feel, yuck, asparagus is something I never want to eat. So we all have the same hardware. We all have a body that craves the same nutrients, but some of us like chocolate and others like vanilla.
That's fascinating. And the hardware obviously keeps our heart pumping and our lungs breathing and everything else happening without us thinking about it. So that's not part of our mind, obviously.
Well, it's part of our brain.
Right.
It's part of it. Yes. So, and one of the things that we used to believe as a society around the world that we only used a small portion of our brain or our mind, and if we could use the rest of it, we'd have superpowers. Today, the digital revolution has given us MRI machines and many other such technical wonders that can look inside the brain while we're still alive and functioning. And now that we see that, we can see that the mind and the brain are both, at least the hardware is constantly being used in all the parts of our brain. So it's that theory that we only use 90%, we only use 10%, is no longer believed to be true.
Is there a specific percentage? I mean, do we actually use 100% of the brain area?
Oh, I think it'll be years until we know the answer to that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So one of the things that the Obama administration will go down in history for is about 3 years ago they instituted a program that's going to spend billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to map the human brain in the same way society came up with the incentive and the money to map the genome system. Mm-hmm. So as soon as we can map the brain, then we'll probably be able to know how effectively we use all of it.
So if we map the brain and understand it, does it help us at all with psychology?
Oh, for sure. I'll give you a simple thing that two simple things that I'm fascinated with currently. One of them is that when it comes to consciousness, we all say, we're unconscious to this, we're conscious to that. Consciousness is an incredibly elusive thing to define. So I read recently scientists defined consciousness by making a metaphor to a thermostat that keeps the heat hot or cold in our bedrooms or our homes. So what a thermostat is a simple strip of metal that expands in the heat and contracts in the cold. And when it expands or contracts, it turns a switch to turn the air conditioning system on or off. So the only thing that thermostat is conscious to is a change of temperature. It has no idea if you're smiling at it. It has no idea if you're mad at it. Then you go all the way down on the evolution scale or up on the evolution scale, and you can see that humans not only are conscious of the temperature, where we have all 5 of our senses, but what we can do that no other animal form that we know of can do is we can project into the future. And we can make models of what we think's happening. An example of that would be if I buy this stock, if I buy an oil stock, I can see that the world is going to be having a crisis. The price of oil will go up. I'll make money.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that's a model we make, or the same thing, we can make the same model, say, well, gee, if all of a sudden they discover new oil and we make peace with the Arabs, oil will go down. So we can make those financial modelings, but other things can't.
And even physical modelings. I heard once that no matter what you look at, as long as it's man-made, all started out as an idea. Every single thing started out as an idea and eventually became a drawing and then a real thing, and with lots of work in between. So that would make sense. And that's interesting that no animal... I never thought about that before. What about looking back? Are we the only animal that looks back? I mean, we embrace memories. Do animals do the same thing? Does a lion say, "Oh man, remember when a cub was little"? do they do this?
Well, we really don't know, but what we believe is that animals, their memory can only go back a very short period of time, maybe hours or a day or so. So, like an example of someone with a photographic memory is someone that memorizes everything, but what's also amazing about it is they don't forget anything. So if you look at the evolution of the way we've developed as a species over millions of years, if you assume that we have a certain amount of gigabytes of filing in our central nervous system, if you compare it to a computer, and we don't have an infinite amount of storage, then for evolution it's important that we forget things to make room for new storage.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes sense.
Well, that puts out the theory of genetic DNA memory, though.
Sure. So if you look at it in terms of animals who do not have a sophisticated of a central nervous system, and in general they don't have the same size of a mind and things like that, with that, evolution is incredibly good at figuring shortcuts that make us more elegant in how we think. So it's well possible that one of the reasons they don't have the memories is because it doesn't clutter up their way of being.
So maybe one day we can find the switch that says we need a little more memory, and we can remember our parents' memories.
Sure, but you know what the switch will look like?
Mm-hmm.
It'll look like gene therapy. The switch will look like some cell that will induce other cells to produce that quality.
The idea of looking back, you talk about that in the very beginning of the book. Something as the older we get, I think the more we look to the past, and it's not just looking to the past as if to remember not to make that same mistake, like, oh, I ran that light once before and I got in a wreck, but rather we look back at it with fondness. We look back at it with, like, we almost erase.
That's memory amnesia.
Yeah, we almost erase all the bad stuff.
We do.
Right? And we say, gosh, weren't times better back then? But there wasn't really, but we do that, and I don't know.
You do that a lot with your family.
But you talk about that.
We have one of the joys of my life is my mother is 95.
Wow.
And she came for dinner about 3 years ago and hasn't left. And I'm joking about that. She's a wonderful person. But here is a woman I've known, like we all know our mothers, and now I see her at 95. And she has shifted her point of view, and it's amazing for me to see. When I was a boy, she would talk about her parents, and there'd be anger and disappointment because of some of the trials and tribulations she shared growing up. And I heard this from the time I was a child, certainly up until about the last 10 or 15 years. Now, at 95, she remembers her mother and her father in the kindest, loving, sweetest ways. All of those negative memories have fallen off, and she has replaced it with a history that's very pleasing to her. And I'm wondering if this just isn't part of the elegant system of how we come to peace as we age.
We hope so. Yeah. Wow. It's almost like being able to let go of things that we need to let go of because they're holding us down. But you know what I've often thought, though? When we're 20, we're looking ahead to the future. When we're 90 or 95, do we still look ahead to the future, or do we kind of let go of that and just kind of dwell in the present or the past?
Okay. All of our thoughts, we all have a voice in our head, whether we're aware of it or not. And the voice in our head is it's the command center of our central nervous system. And the voice in our head has one job and one job only. Every thought you will ever have is purely for survival. So when we look at survival, an example of survival would be you go to work and the boss gives you a look that you interpret as a dirty look. All of a sudden, your mind is racing ahead. He doesn't like me. I'm going to get fired. How am I going to take the vacation I planned? Where am I going to get another job? So the one look sends that voice in your head making, again, models of the future. What happens if I lose my job?
Oh, yeah,
true.
all the
That's
time,
true.
every
Yeah.
time, yeah.
Yeah, so while we're thinking about the past, we're really not thinking about the past. We're modeling potential scenarios in the future.
When somebody's
And
late
the
for an
only
appointment?
Yes, the only thing we have to figure out how to survive in that situation is researching all previous experiences, finding the one that comes up that seemed like the best solution to a similar problem, and applying that past-based solution to the problem that hasn't come up yet in the future.
Oh,
and
wow.
this is what we do constantly.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the problems about doing such a thing is that in general, when we filed these stories away, were stories we filed in childhood. And when we see situations happen to us in childhood, we don't have the depth of understanding to see them from all the perspectives that we're going along. Example, you say to your parent you want the latest toy, and the latest toy is an expensive toy, and the parent says,
Nope.
You can't have it. So you get mad and disappointed, and you file away perhaps that your parent didn't want you to be happy. Well, parent wanted you to be happy. They didn't have the money to pay for the toy.
Yeah, which you had no comprehension of
right,
at the
right.
time, no understanding.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of different personalities that seem to, just from an observational point of view, there's the person that says, you know what, I'm going to get it. No matter what I hear from anybody, I'm going to make sure that happens to me, whether it's I'm going to get that job, or I'm going to move to this place, or I'm going to have this kind of an income. And then there's another mentality that says, you know what, I can't do anything because the system puts me down. The man is my problem, or whatever. There's always a blame thing going on. There's those two, and I'm wondering if the person in the second description was smart enough to say, well, I'm holding myself back. Would the information in the book be able to change them?
The information in the book would be able to tell them why that phenomenon is happening and give you ways to work in changing yourself. We can, in the way we were talking a few minutes ago about the our brain being used all the time, we now understand that there's something called neuroplasticity. And what neuroplasticity means, the simplest example would be if you've never taken a piano lesson. You take your first piano lesson, the teacher shows you how to do the scales. They're quite awkward to do, but the teacher says, I want you to practice that a half an hour a day. Our next lesson is in a week, and if you practice a half an hour a day, you'll be able to play them properly for me when I come back. You do your work, and magically, when the teacher comes back, you do a pretty good job at playing the scales. So the reason for that is neuroplasticity. We're born with it's currently believed maybe 100 billion neurons in our skulls as babies, and as they come online, ideas are formed, and they form like branches on a tree. So eventually, where when you were born it looked like your tree had no leaves, by the time you get to be 4 or 5, there's an infinite amount of leaves, and you can do all sorts of things. So we understand that those neurons constantly can reform themselves and work in different departments. So when someone who has sight through an accident loses their sight, their neuroplasticity will use a good deal of their central nervous system to get better at sound or touch to compensate for what they have no longer get in the way of information through sight. So our neurons can adapt and constantly change the work they do throughout all of our life. No matter how old you get, your neurons can still adapt.
And comparing it to a musical instrument is really a good comparison. I think anybody who's like my age, I'm 59. Dan, how old are you?
39.
So the computers have been more in Dan's life than in mine. But I can remember when, first of all, in this job, there wasn't a single computer, and all of a sudden, computers became necessary to learn, and it was similar to learning a musical instrument. It was, and now it's as if we're virtuosos in those instruments.
Well.
Oh yes, and at the same time, again going back to what we forget, the young people of today who are so used to texting now think when it comes to writing, they think of 140 letter writing, so like texting writing,
Right,
as
right.
opposed to the prose. So it used to be if we look at a movie in the 1800s, we will see the principal character writing a letter that may be 10 pages. And there is a whole art to the way we used to know how to write. You'd start with greetings and end with salutations. You were taught to say something pleasant and then to get to the point and then to apologize for getting to the point. Today, people no longer have the skills to write. If there was a film that was popular 6-8 months ago called Her with Joaquin Phoenix, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that film, but the premise of it, and this was about 30 years from now, the premise was the major character, his whole job is to write letters for other people.
And his girlfriend is a robot or a computer program? Yeah, okay.
Her girlfriend is something similar to Siri on our Apple cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
So as we make room for more information, we let go of other things. Who knows anymore how to make a garden? Who knows what to plant where?
The book is called Your Mind is What Your Brain Does for a Living. Learn how to make it work for you. That's an important part of this title. Stephen J. Fogel is our guest, and he's the author of the book. And Stephen, we have a phone call or two, and I'll squeeze in one if I can. If we have time for two, I will. Good morning. You're on the air.
Good morning, Larry. Good morning, Robin and Stephen. This is June, and how are you today, everyone? I hope you're well. I have a question. How do you stop your mind? I call it rolling. Sometimes when you sit down and you try to relax, your mind just starts to roll like a Rolodex, if you can get the configuration I'm trying to think, and you almost can't stop it. It seems to go from one thought to another, and I'm wondering if there's a way naturally that you have discovered to stop that so you can just calm yourself a little more. And I thank you for the opportunity to talk to you, and I'll hang up and listen to your answer. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good question.
It's a wonderful question, and that's the kind of thing that we train ourselves for. So the way I personally do it is I now use that concept of making projections and models into the future as what that voice in the head is talking about. So what I will do is I will often ask myself, is what I am thinking about helpful to me, or is it just clutter? So currently, right now, I'm working on one of the biggest financial real estate deals I've ever done to make my living, and I'll find myself being preoccupied, should we sell this portfolio or not? And I will ask myself, is that something important enough that I really want to think about it now? And because it really is important to me, I'll let it happen. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if I start thinking that the stuff in the garage needs to be put away, and it's time for me to go to sleep, I'll say, why do I want to clutter myself with that? So the way to look at extraneous thoughts that pop up for us, and we're really not sure if we even want to think about them, is to consider them as if they were clouds in the sky. So if you look at a cloud in the sky, and you look at it really carefully for a minute or two, you see the breeze will just blow it from one side of the sky to the other side of the sky, and you don't have to pay attention to it. It's just something floating through the sky, infinitely far away, and it doesn't affect you. So when you consider those thoughts to be nothing more than clouds going, you let them come in, pass through you, and continue going. You do not attach significance. They only become important when we attach significance.
Wow. You're almost telling me the answer to the question I've always had when like a yoga specialist or somebody is on the air with us, they say, you have to empty your mind. How do you do that? How do you empty your mind? That might be the answer right there. The book is called Your Mind is What Your Brain Does for a Living. The interview we just did is even not even scratching the surface. This is a very in-depth book and practical applications to actually improving your life with the book. I'd like to give the book away that I have, the copy I have, I should say. Call me if you want it. The rest of us have to go buy it. I've only got 30 seconds, Stephen. Can you give us a website or two?
Sure. It's Stephen J. Fogel, StevenJayFogel.com. And you can also get the book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever you buy your books.
Okay, excellent. Great conversation. I always know when we have a good conversation because it seems like the clock creeps up on me. Thank you so much for being on the air with us today, Stephen.
Thank you very much.
Very good. We'll take a little break. We'll be right back.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. A desperate search for survivors underway in one of the worst mining disasters in Turkey's history. Nearly 240 confirmed dead, more than 100 thought to still be trapped underground.
The latest word from officials on the scene, quote, hopes are diminishing in terms of this being a rescue operation, referring to finding those folks underground alive.
Fox's Leland Fittert. There's violence in Nigeria against extremists.
Villagers from a town in northeastern Nigeria say they've killed or arrested dozens of members of the terrorist group Boko Haram. That's the Islamist militant group that kidnapped the hundreds of schoolgirls last month.